Okay, welcome back. Let's get started with our second lesson. And in the first lesson, we created the Angular app, and I told you a little bit about the Node ecosystem, and we fight it a little bit with the internet, but I hope it will work out nicely now. At the end of the last lesson, we created a very, very simple menu, and of course, we want to style this menu. And there I can tell you something which is important when it comes to Angular, because if you take a very close look at your files, you will find a CSS file down here in the source folder, which is called styles.css. And then you will find a second CSS file, which is here, and it says app component CSS. Now, what is the difference? Down here, these are so-called global styles. So styles that you define in styles.css down here apply to the entire application. Here, this CSS file, if one is called global, what do you think that this is? Local styles. Angular allows you to define visual components. Components that you can reuse in your app. And the styles that you define in the component only apply to this particular component. So if we style an UL in app component CS, only ULs in app component HTML are styled. If we style a UL in styles.css, all ULs in the entire application are styled. Global styles, local styles. Let's try both. Go into styles.css, that's the first thing. And here I would like to do a little bit of styling. Body, the HTML body is styled here. And I would like to use a sans serif font. Are you aware of what serif fonts and sans serif fonts are? Let me quickly tell you. If you, for instance, go to fontsgoogle.com, here they are, and we take a look. Yes, this is better. Here it's better. See this W and see this W? See these nice little thingies here at the top of the W? These are called serifs, Serifen in German. And up here, we don't have that. In French, sans means without. Sans serif means is a font without these serifs. So this is a sans serif font without these beautiful markers here. I am not a typing expert, so I don't know how they are really called. This is without serifs, and this is with serifs. Okay? And the standard here is that a serif font is used in the browser app. I think it's Times New Roman or something like this. And I don't like that. So what we can do is we can change the font family here. And I personally like, for instance, this one. And you see here you find the word sans. And that indicates that this is a font sans serif without serifs. And if you do that one, we get a different font. See? So now you know what the difference is between serif fonts and sans serif fonts. Many newspapers use serif fonts. Typical websites use sans serif fonts, but it really differs. It's a matter of design. And I would like to center the whole content in the middle. So what I do is I set the max width to 720 pixels. At least this is what I came up with. And I set the margin to 0 auto. That means that we don't have a margin at the top and at the bottom, and left and right, the system should calculate the margin automatically. So if you take a look here, if I remove see, it's now in the middle. So what the system does, it's taking a max width here, max width of 720 pixels, and then it chooses the correct margin to the left and right automatically. This is automatically calculated, so it's centered in the middle of the screen. I can show you that. If I make it larger, it's at one point it's going to come into the middle. See? Nice, isn't it? Yeah, it's much easier to read. My wife has a huge monitor at home. I think it's this wide. And if she uses a website full screen, it doesn't make any sense that the text writes from here to here. So it really makes sense to put it in the middle. So this is exactly what we are going to do here. But writing the correct CSS is not core part of this course. What I absolutely want you to remember is that styles.css apply to the entire application. To demonstrate that, we can go into the UL here, and just for demo purposes, we say background color yellow. If I do that, you will see that now our menu is yellow. So although we have defined it here in styles.css and not here in app component CSS, this applies to the UL. Why? Because these are global styles. And that is important for Angular. This is what you should remember. Styling, I will show you a little bit of styling, a little bit of CSS magic, but that's not the core of this course. The core of this course is Angular, and this is what you should remember. Good. Let's get rid of the UL, and let's stick with the body formatting here. Now, let's go into app component CSS here and define our menu. I've come up with a bunch of things that I want to do to the UL, to the unordered list. The first thing, what I would like to do is the list style type should be none. That changes our app so the dots go away. See? They are no longer here. That is nice. Then we define the margin of 0. That happens, so we move it up, see, to the very top of the page. Then we do a padding of 10 pixels. That will make sure that it is on the left-hand side, and we get a little bit of room here at the top and here at the left. You will see in a second why I do the padding here. We do an overflow hidden that will automatically hide all the scroll bars that maybe will happen. And then we define a background color of blue. I decided blue, you can take any color that you want. Okay, already looks nice. And the last thing that we do is we say, make it a color white. Doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because in this case, it is a hyperlink, and hyperlinks are formatted differently. So we can also say down here, every hyperlink, A, should also have the color white. And then it looks nice. See? The important thing from an Angular perspective is that all these styles are only applied to HTML of the component. They are local styles. They belong together. They are best buddies. If I use an UL, an unordered list, in a different component, the styles are not applied. Got it? That is called style isolation. There are different techniques in Angular how Angular can implement that. Because old browsers, they do not support style encapsulation. But newer browsers have special features for that. And Angular is capable of doing it in different ways. It's capable of doing it in a backward compatibility way, and it's capable of doing it only for new browsers. It depends on what you want to achieve. I will not go down that rabbit hole because backward compatibility and browser compatibility in general is a really complex matter. There is one site that I can give you. It's not core part of this course, and I will never ask you to know that by heart. But still, it is interesting. It's called Can I Use. Have you ever heard of Can I Use? Can I Use is a great site where you can, for instance, say, hey, CSS grid, where does it work? And it shows you in green which browsers support it, and it shows you in red which browsers do not support it. So if you want to use a specific browser feature, and you are asking yourself, will this work in Safari, for instance? Then you can check it with Can I Use. Good? Just a quick tip here. Now I want the menu items not one below each other, but I want to have them side by side. And for that, we are going to define list items, a style for list items. And here we can say float left. That means that it floats on the left side. It's not written one below each other, but the first is left to the second, which is left to the third, which is left to the fourth, which is left to the fifth. So they are assigned one left to each other. And this is what we say here, float left. And then we need a little bit of margin. Let's do another li. I'm doing another li consciously. Give me a second and you will understand it immediately. Margin left, let's say 10 pixels, something like this. And that will give me a little bit of space here between the different menu items. See it? But for demo purposes, I am a little bit picky here and say I don't want to have this large gap in the middle, and in front, sorry. I only want to have the gaps here starting with the second. What could I do with that? I'm not sure if you know that this is possible. I can use so-called pseudo classes. I can here say not first child. So essentially what I say is margin only for those who are not the first child of the parent. And that will move the first one to the left. See? Understand? At that point, give me a second. At that point in time, I would like to point out something here. If you take a look in my GitHub repository, I have prepared all the things that I'm going to show you in this example here in the examples folder. And here in the source folder, app, CSS, here it is. You have the full code of what I'm going to build together with you. And here you see a lot of important notes. See? These ones. With links to the documentation. See? So this is the material that I give you. Don't expect a lot of PowerPoint slides from me. You are in the 4th grade. You don't need PowerPoint slides anymore. I give you code, but you get code with a lot of comments in there. There is also something else in this code repository, which I will show you a little bit later, so-called code tours. You will see that later. But for now, please remember that we are going to build everything, and with every step I describe in details why we do it. But if you want to read more, take a look at my sample here in the GitHub repository. There you find comments with links to the documentation. You had a question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if I can somehow exclude also the second one, for example, because I tried to write in second child and it didn't work.
Yes, that's possible. If you take a look at the documentation of the first child, then you see here all the pseudo classes. And there is a pseudo class which is called the nth child. See? You write it like that. Nth child, and then you can do various things. So please take a look at the documentation. I just point out nth child is the correct pseudo class that you can do. Okay? I don't want to spend too much time formatting it. I'm just pointing you to a few of interesting things that might also help you with your maybe upcoming 2-year projects, or maybe somebody wants to build a web app in this project. Here you see CSS is really, really powerful. By the way, I want to invite you, if you ever have problems with web development stuff, I told you yesterday that I'm chairman of the coding club Linz of the Coder Dojo. And in the Coder Dojo, my wife typically does a so-called JavaScript TypeScript Fragestunde, which is an office hour. And she has been a professional web developer for more than a decade. She really knows a lot about Angular, CSS, and all this stuff. So if you struggle with things, you're always very welcome to our coding club. You can join her question hour and ask her about any web Angular stuff that you are fighting with. Of course, you can also come to me here, but this will be probably too basic for you, because here we are fighting with keyboards, looking for the curly brace on the keyboard, because here I have 10-year-old kids But my wife is really especially for more advanced developers who want to discuss some web development stuff. Okay? So if you need help in that area, ask me or simply join our club. It's free, everything is volunteered, so no money involved here at all. Good. Now we have a nice little menu, but the menu doesn't really do anything. So I can click on it, see, it doesn't do anything. I always get the same page. So we need to create something. We can, and that's the point of Angular, create multiple components to really nicely structure our application. And I ask you to open a terminal window in the folder where your app lives. You can open the terminal window here directly in Visual Studio Code, or you can open a terminal window separately. It doesn't matter if it's Bash or CMD, just go to the folder where your app lives, and there we type the following: npx ng generate component level 1. This command is noted down in my course notes. So if you take a look at the course notes, you will find this command in the kind of cheat sheet. You will definitely have to call this or run this command in homeworks, in tests. You have to remember it. This is how we generate a new component. What we can do, because we currently don't need it, is we can say skip tests. Tests will be a topic for later. And then you press enter, and that will give you, hopefully, if everything goes right, a folder which is called level 1. See? In this level 1 here, you have, oh my God, Linux has finished updating. I could now switch back to Linux, but I will not do it. But finally, the internet was fast enough. I'm not sure if it was the school internet. Maybe it's a general glitch here, but I don't know. I don't care. Level 1, you see, you have the HTML file, the CSS file, and the TypeScript file for our component. If you watch closely what the thing tells you, then you get the notification that Angular also updated your app module TS. Can you find it? It's here. Let's take a look at the app module TS. And here you will see that automatically the level 1 component was added to the so-called declarations. So in this case, Angular tells the entire environment that there is a level 1 component. It exists. So now Angular knows about the level 1 component. If I would delete this line from our app module TS, the level 1 component would not be part of our application anymore. Now the level 1 component consists of HTML, CSS, and TypeScript. Let's take a look at the TypeScript file first. The TypeScript file contains a class. See that one? And on top of the class, we have here the so-called, let's write it here, decorator. It's written down as a comment in my sample solution. This decorator contains Angular configuration for the component. Especially, it binds together the HTML, the CSS, and the TypeScript file. This is the glue that tells Angular, hey, the HTML for this component can be found here, and the CSS for this component can be found here. Got it? Good. The rest of the class is really empty. We can keep it empty. It doesn't do anything, so it's fine. We will focus on HTML and CSS for now. If we take a look at HTML, it just says level 1 works. And if we take a look at level 1 component CSS, it doesn't contain anything. So let's go and create a tic-tac-toe board. For that, I ask you to create a table. In the table, we have the t-body. In the body, we have a table row. In the table row, we have table data. 3 times. Check, check. I didn't touch the mouse for all of these, just a bunch of keyboard shortcuts. Let me show you again, if you are also into keyboard shortcut like I am. I don't write the lower and greater signs for the HTML elements. I just say table and press enter. Sorry, enter. And that will give me the opening tag and the closing tag. Enter again, I'm in the next line. T body, enter, enter. T row, enter, enter. TD, enter. Shift, Alt, cursor down, cursor down. Mark the lines. Mark, 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 mark. Oh, sorry, now correct. Shift, Alt, cursor down, cursor down. Everything is duplicated. See? You do not absolutely need to use all these shortcuts, but they make you faster. If you are a professional developer, fast typing is one of the most important productivity tools that you have. So learn to type fast. So in order that we see anything, please write some X's and O's somewhere in the TDs. It doesn't matter what you do, just put some X's and O's in there so we see anything. Now let's take a look at the level 1 component, right? So go into the website and go to level 1, and do you see the table? No, of course not. Something is missing. Good. I want to teach you the next important concept of Angular, and this is routing. I already told you at the beginning when we created the app that we want to have routing in our app. And the whole routing stuff is configured here in the app routing module TS. See? Please open this file, app routing module TS. And then just do what I do, and probably I don't need to tell you anything more, it will just work. I'll show you. Here, we simply say path level 1 component level 1 component. And the second thing that I write here is path empty, path match full, redirect to level 1. Can you guess from the context what these 2 lines do? We create a route at the path level 1 and tell Angular that it should activate the level 1 component when we use this route. And if we type in nothing, and I mean really nothing, then it should redirect us to the level 1 route. Let me show you what the result is. If I go here, see, and if I enter nothing as the path, enter, I get redirect to level 1 and I see my table. Got it? So what's going on behind the scenes? Behind the scenes, Angular will recognize the route. It will look for, take a look at my code, it's not important. It will look for the router outlet. And there where it finds the router outlet, it will embed the content of the component which is referenced here in the path. Understood? Again, in the app component we have the router outlet, which is just a placeholder telling Angular whatever the route is, insert the content of the route here. And then we define in the routing module the different routes. And at the end of the day, we will have 5 routes here. Level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5. I think you get the idea, right? Great, awesome. Now we have one last problem. Please go into app yeah, question.
Yeah, Yeah, somehow it's not working at my PC, and I think
Good.
there's something wrong.
Let's check that.
Can I show you?
Absolutely. Yes, good. Can you please, no, not like that. What you did, please take a look at my screen, because many of you will make that mistake. What you did is you just typed in what I typed, and the system now says cannot find level 1 component.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So what I did, I typed level 1 component, and I didn't type it fully, but I pressed enter. Watch what's going to happen if I just press enter. Boom. I get an additional line of code, this one.
Yeah.
Because in TypeScript, you have to import the TypeScript modules using the import statement at the top of the file. So in order that the app routing module knows about the level 1 component, you need to add this import statement. And if you don't press enter, just type in level 1 component, then the app routing module complains that you tell it it should use the level 1 component, but it doesn't have an idea which one. Imagine that you would have 3 different level 1 components in your app. Which one should you use? Therefore, we need the import.
Okay.
Very important thing, if you missed the enter, you can always use the light bulb here, see, this one, and you can apply the quick fix. And it will do the import too. Of course, there is a shortcut for that. Control dot will give you the same. Control dot enter will give you the import. Does that solve your problem?
Yeah, thank you.
Many of you will do that mistake, I'm pretty sure. So very good question. Then let's fix a problem that you are not aware of, but it is severe. So far, we had this hyperlinks here using the href, the hyperlink reference. This is how we define a hyperlink. You should know that from previous courses from the first 3 years. That's HTML 101. Everybody knows that. But with Angular, we should not use href. We must not use href. So what I do, I apply the multi-line cursor by pressing Shift, Control, Alt, cursor down, 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 remove the href, and replace it with router link. I'm very sorry, you just have to remember that. It is like it is. This is part of Angular. This is now an Angular router link. The other one works too, but it's very inefficient. So if you would create an href in a test, for instance, then you would get at least 1 point decremented from your grade because you have to use the router link. That's absolutely necessary. Everything else works, but it's very inefficient. And now we should be good. Now we have our level 1, we can click on the level 1 here, we can click on level 2, that doesn't change anything because there is no level 2 route at the moment. So level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 are reserved for future use. We only have level 1 currently. ng generate component gives us a new component. It is added to the module. We have to add it to routing if we want to do routing. And we have to add it to our menu using the router link. Now let's format our table and our TicTacToe board a little bit. First, just for demo purposes, please go into level 1 component HTML and give it a CSS class. You know what a CSS class is? I see nodding heads. That is good. Let's call it TicTacToe board. That marks our table to be a TicTacToe board. And then we can go into the level 1 component CSS. And again, I repeat myself consciously, although maybe I bore you, but I want to bore you because it should be so obvious. This is a local style. The styles that we define here only apply to the level 1 component, exclamation mark. Remember that, that's important. Good. Let's format this thing, table.TicTacToe board. Good, question.
But
It doesn't apply. No. App component CSS only applies to app component HTML. Level 1 component CSS only applies to level 1 component HTML. In practice, this is super useful. Imagine that you work on a common Angular application. You work together on one Angular application. And you call the style highlight. And you call the style highlight. You use yellow background and red color, and you use blue background and yellow color. Now we have a problem. In traditional CSS, your styles would conflict. So you have to somehow come up with a strange naming concept. Maybe you add your name to the CSS class, which is not recommended, but people do it all the time. In Angular, that's not a problem. Because you define highlight in your component, you define highlight in your component, nothing breaks. Got it? Good. The first thing that I would like to do here, I would like to keep it empty and add a second one. Table, tic-tac-toe board, TD. And that means I want to format all the table data elements inside of the tic-tac-toe board. And here we just say border is a 1 pixel solid black. And let's see what's going to happen. Okay, this is what's going to happen. Is it beautiful? Nope, it's not beautiful. So the next thing that we can do is we can say we do a border collapse. Not this one. Border collapse. Collapse. And by defining the border collapse, the borders sink into each other. You see? They are now directly on top of each other. That looks much better. So this is what I want to have from you. Border, 1 pixel solid black, border collapse, collapse. Now we want to make our border, our table items a little bit larger. So we simply say they have a width, and I think 75 pixels is a good thing. And they have a height, which is also 75 pixels, so we have a nice little square. See? This is how it should look like. However, you know the principle, don't repeat yourself. It's never good to repeat yourself when doing coding, so this is not very nice. So therefore, CSS supports so-called variables. What you can define is you can define with minus minus a variable. It's just the syntax. And then you can use here, instead of 75, a var width. And you can use it 2 times. See? It's like a variable in a programming language. Here, you define the variable. Here, you refer to the variable and use its value. So if we want to make it larger, we only have to change one value. And that will give us a larger grid. If we want to make it smaller, we just change one value and we have a smaller grid. It's really up to you. Did you know CSS variables so far? No? New for you? They really come in handy. Now let's deal with the table data elements. What I would like to do is I would like to pump up the font size to 50 pixel. I would like to do a text align center. I would like to do a vertical align middle. And I think that it's good because then we have the X's and O's right in the middle, you see? Looks much nicer, doesn't it? I think the CSS attributes are pretty clear here. Font size, larger font, text align, center, horizontal alignment, vertical align, middle, clear. Shouldn't be a problem. But I also want to have a nice color. So when a field is occupied by X, I want to make it red. If a field is occupied by O, it should be blue. And for that, we are going to use, again, CSS classes. Let me show you what I mean. Here in the TD with the X, I say class equals occupied X. And with the O's, I use the occupied O. So here we have another O so we also need that one. And because I have the classes here in my HTML, I can now go into my CSS and define .occupied X and say this should have a background color. This is red. And the occupied O should be blue. Feel free to use different colors if you want. And that will give us a nice little board. For me personally, I would like to have the font in a white color. I like that even more. But if you want to use a black font, black X, black O, that's really up to you. Please design this as you want it. Use here, here, and here proper colors. If you don't like my color scheme, use something else. Did you get the idea what we did here? We defined the classes in order to conditionally format the TDs. This was the red one, and this is the blue one. And by defining the classes, we can change the color. This is how HTML and CSS and so on should be applied. Does anybody have problems? Okay, then before we go into the next break, I think we have only a few minutes left, right? I think so. Let's add at the bottom of the HTML file two more things. First, we add a header 2 that says the winner is, and we add a button which says restart. With restart, we can restart the game, and we want to print the winner. Let's take a look. Looks nice. Of course, at the end, we will not print ... here. We will really write X or O, but that will be something that we do in Angular. So what do I want you to take away from this little exercise? If you do Angular development, you have to understand HTML. You have to understand CSS. That's really crucial. And typically, CSS is underestimated. Many developers think that, CSS, that's so trivial, a bunch of colors and that's it. It's not. CSS is one of the most underestimated programming tools that non-front-end developers heavily underestimate in its power. It can do so many tricks. And mastering CSS is a skill that needs years of practice. Unfortunately, nowadays, many developers think that the most prestigious area of software development is in the backend. Building huge clouds where you deal with performant things and so on. I can tell you, front-end development is equally important, if not more important, than back-end development. Many projects nowadays, they simply rely on existing backends. They use, for instance, Google Firebase. Have you ever taken a look at Firebase? It's great, right? How much code do you have to write in order to use Firebase and store data to a database? Exactly 0. None. It's just there. Create it, use it, done. Where do you have to invest all your thinking and designing and coding? The front end. Front-end development is important, and you can earn a lot of money with front-end development. Is it easy? No, absolutely not. So this small example should have given you an idea what's possible with CSS. But we were just scratching the tip of the iceberg. There is much more. But this is not a web development course, so I will not dive into the details of CSS. And to be honest, I'm not a black belt expert in CSS. I am not. My wife is. So if you have problems with CSS, you can ask me, and I will probably call her so she can help me, or you can ask her directly if you want to use our programming club. We are perfectly in time. We have 1 hour left, and that is exactly in my timing. So what I want to do with you, I would like to start the level 2 after the break. And in the level 2, we will add logic. We will add TypeScript and behavior. And our goal at the end of the following lesson is to have a more or less complete tic-tac-toe game written in Angular. Okay?